have too much to say other than welcome back to everybody. Carol, I don't know if you got anything you want to throw out to the group to kick us off.
It's hard to believe another year has flowed by, if you can use a watershed term. Grateful we could find time to get together, and hopeful that we'll come back from the bump of declined grant applications, bigger and better than ever. So
yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can start it off with a roll call. How's that sound?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Bartlesmeyer.
Present.
Member Delonte. Member Sturman. Oh, excuse me. I'll wait for Mr. Delonte to come on. Member Delonte is here. Member Sturman.
Here.
Member Berger. Member Patton. And Mr. Patton. Mr. Patton just came on as well. Member Braman.
Here.
Member Donaldson.
Here.
Councilmember Edens. Co-chair Holthouse.
Here.
And co-chair Farmer.
Here.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Farmer, I'm gonna, with your permission, I want to share something with this committee that I intend to share with each of the committee meetings as we meet these last few. I saw something on television last night that I thought was rather interesting. It was a picture on the wall of a home of someone, and as we all know, none of us on this call or working for the city or anything are not infallible to making mistakes. We all make mistakes. We own up to them. We fix them, and we move on. But there was a sign in a house that this was a writer, and his sign said, "We will make sure that our mistakes are much better. We will improve on our mistakes." Or how did it go? Something about, we'll make sure that our mistakes are better the next time. So
I like it.
We make mistakes, but we're going to make them better next time. And I thought that was very apropos. And I think we should all just kind of keep that in mind. We'll make our mistakes better next time. So
I like it.
Anyway, sorry for the digressing.
No, it's all good. So I don't see anybody as an attendee, and so I'm assuming we don't have any public comment, right? That we know about. So let's do, I guess we'll do the approval of minutes. How about from our September meeting? It's been obviously a little while here, so maybe a little foggy to some of us, but if any of you would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our September meeting, that would be great.
I'll make a motion.
All right.
The minutes.
Mr. Bartlesmeyer, and seconded by Mr. Sturman. Does anybody have anything they would like to add or any questions or concerns about the minutes? All right. Then all in favor of approving the minutes from our September meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstain?
Abstention. Carol.
Carol's going to abstain. Okay. Cool. Well, for those of you that were hopping on as we were getting started, I don't really have too much to add other than just to welcome everybody back here after a few months. So I figure we can kind of just get going with some of the stuff that Mr. Bunich has prepared for us so we can see where we've been and where we're going. I assume it's you, Joe. Is that right?
Well, certainly, Mr. Chair, it's a group effort between the Department of Public Works, Department of Planning, and our city administrator, Mr. Cross. So there's a lot of authors to all of this. But in regards to the first item, the departments and the city administrator thought it was important that before the end of this year, 2022, we kind of take a step back and just see what we've accomplished and the number of meetings we've held during that year. And so the departments and the city administrator prepared a memorandum. It kind of highlights what we identified as probably 8 of the major tasks that were completed. Of them, some substantial, some maybe not as substantial. But I think key amongst them is we did finally define that list of critical locations, our priority projects, as you know. We ended up with 5 of them that we sought immediate funding for so we could correct the problems that we're seeing in the watersheds themselves. We also, through the recommendation of the task force and support of City Council, were able to engage consultants to help us on 2 major projects, that being the submittal of permits to the Corps of Engineers relative to some of those priority locations, as well as beginning that analysis of detention and retention basins for possible retrofits. We also did quite a bit with regards to our public education efforts. We've sent out letters to different homeowners associations, as well as created public education items that we distributed during many of our concerts, the Celebrate Wildwood event, and have on display here at City Hall for anybody that visits. The last 2 items, the USGS study was a major coup, I think, for the city of Wildwood to create a partnership with the federal agency. Dr. Leroy, the principal scientist, has provided an update, and that's an agenda item a little later on, but I think we can never minimize that. We have kind of climbed the mountain there with a partnership with a very prestigious federal agency that hopefully will give us a lot of good information. And then finally, we were, with the support of the task force and City Council, able to apply for ARPA funds. Obviously, it was less than a desirous outcome, but certainly we never shied away from trying to find funding, whether it's through Mr. Sturman's efforts, the federal government, state government, wherever we can. So I think the conclusion of the memorandum from this city team members to all of you was, it was a very prosperous year. We may not have a tangible project under construction, but we're doing everything we can to make that happen as soon as possible. So, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to Mr. Cross now.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just simply like to add my 2 cents, or $1.50 anyway. I don't know if I'm worth 2 cents or whatever. I'd like to offer kudos to this committee, Mr. Vunich, who is the primary author of that document. We're hearing some noise there somewhere. Anyway, I think even though there may not necessarily be some specific tangible results on things, you know, where it feels like we're not making progress, I think we've made tremendous progress. And I think the city is proud of the work that this committee has done, this task force has done. We are shovel ready. We've learned some things. Yes, we didn't get the latest round of ARPA funding, but we have context now. We have a legislative consultant who is working on our behalf in Jeff City. So I think I think the next 6 to 12 months, I think we're going to see a whole lot of movement forward because of the work that you all have done over the last 12 to 18 months to where we are ready to move. And Ms. Holthouse has said this several times, we are shovel ready. We've gotten to the point, and you all have done that to get to the point to where we can pivot very quickly when that money is available, and it will be available. There's plenty of money still in the pipeline, and we will continue working at it. So I'd just like to offer my congratulations to the success of what you all have done, even though it may not feel like it. It truly is. I mean, if you look back to where you were at the beginning of this process, you are light years ahead. And so my congratulations to all of you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I got put on the task force, I guess, a few months after it got started, but I'm very pleased about what we've been able to get done. And I'm actually very pleased also about kind of our reconfiguration, which is more or less what you're seeing tonight. Lauren and I will be the 2 council members that will be on the committee moving forward, but I think that that'll help us to kind of expedite things as we move through the process. And I've been very pleased, at least at council meetings and things, you know, when we've asked for pretty much whatever we need, it has been a unanimous decision to move forward with whatever it is. So the council is moving in the right direction. And as soon as we are funded with some things, we're going to start moving some dirt around. So it's going to be exciting. I can't wait to get started on something. That'll be a big day, I think, for all of us, for sure. Carol, you want to throw anything out there?
Just, I feel like we in the last year, got much more focused and on critical mitigation areas, but also expanded our view of how we're really going to have an impact to be also looking at things more proactively. So I think, adding the thread where we're looking at detention basins, and I was encouraged to see that we're, also committed to starting that arduous process of a stormwater management plan, but that's where, you really get to, even before the detention basins have to, capture it and slow it down, and you have to fix what isn't right in the creeks. That's where you're going to really, stop problems from occurring to begin with. So again, we maybe haven't, put a lot of miles behind us, but I really do feel like we've got a much better roadmap than we had a year ago.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want to add about what we've got kind of coming down the pipeline in terms of what we've been doing and where we're going? All right, then grant
When the right-
application. Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Sure,
When,
Mr.
when
Chairman.
the right time is, it may not be now. I've got some questions and comments on a rundown of the allegation of funds from ARPA, that long spreadsheet, list of cities and what they received,
Sure. I mean,
whenever it's appropriate.
I'm okay if you want to do that now. I think that kind of follows along with what we're talking about.
Mr. Chair. if we
Oh, yeah,
could,
go ahead, Joe.
That's our next item on the
Oh.
agenda.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's do this. Mr. Vunich, set us up with the with your updates, and then Mr. Sturman, you may ask your questions.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair, and Madam Chair. Again, as you all know, we were not successful with the 5 grant applications to the state of Missouri. The Department of Public Works really did the lion's share of the work and did it under a very abbreviated timeframe from the Department of Planning's perspective. And I was just going to ask Dan Ron, who had worked on the grants, and Rick Brown, the Director of Public Works, if they'd just like to give a bit of an overview, and then we'll accept questions from all of the task force members. Thank you.
Mr. Ron, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everyone. Yes, unfortunately, we did not receive grants. We submitted for 5 projects for a total of $6 million. There were a total of, I think, 67 projects that were funded in the program. Kind of a couple of things to note, I suppose. The city of Springfield got, I think, 14 projects, which is interesting. MSD also received quite a few projects. I think they had I think 5 projects for $20 million. And those projects, I will say the scoring for these was biased for low population and low to moderate income areas. So, and we just don't meet that in Wildwood. And so we got basically the most amount of points we could get, but we just weren't eligible for a lot of the total points. So, and I think that's why you see like the city of Springfield, I think because you can go by census tracts on the low to moderate income. And so they can individualize those projects in those areas and pull the income data from those areas. And I think that's probably how they were able to get in so many projects, because I was surprised to see that they were on the list so many times. So only 2 municipalities in St. Louis County received funding, Valley Park and I think Frontenac. So that's also interesting. But I wanted to note that MSD also submitted for at least one of our projects, Mr. Berger's project on his street. So, but unfortunately that was not selected either. So I've kind of got a bunch of data. I don't, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any. So.
All right. Mr. Sturman, take it away.
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, I looked that over, and correct me where I'm wrong if I took something incorrectly. And I have some questions that I'm sure they're probably we would not have answers for this, and I understand. But and Mr. Ron mentioned some things that caught my eye. the long list of Springfield projects. I don't know. I've been to Springfield a lot. My youngest used to go there a lot. My youngest daughter went to school there. And, you know, they're mentioned, I think you maybe said about 14 times, and they're well over 12 to 14 million dollars in that city. And as I know it, that really took me back. It appeared that the main criteria was the financial standing of the city. And I don't know if it's financial standing as compared to its population. I'm not sure about that, but then I thought, well, that's fine. But did they go beyond that and consider how critical some of the city's problems are? Like, for an example, I know we are an affluent city, but did they take in consideration, like at our triple meander, and what's going to happen to the north portion of the mapping? I'm speaking from a person who mapped a lot of Cox Creek from Clayton Road all the way up to Strucker, and how close that building is, a northern section, to about a 12-15 foot bare earth bank, the triple meander area, Strucker Road, and some homes that are close, and then we've got homes in other, like in Evergreen. I wonder if they took that into consideration. Now, while we are a affluent city, I'm not an expert in creeks so much, but I've done a lot of construction estimating, and the amount I mapped, the millions just kept piling up, million and million and million. And so I would ask, yeah, maybe we are a city of 36,000. Are we sitting around with that many millions just ready to dole out? You know, now, if you talk about cities that are well off, they're given Ladue, but I think maybe is one of them's delayed, 5 mil, if I remember correctly, to Ladue. Now, the last I heard, Ladue was not exactly an impoverished city. And so I don't quite get that. Let's see, what else did I have? Yeah, okay, that's my spiel. There you go.
Yeah, I think those are all good questions. It's always interesting when you see how funding gets doled out. You're kind of curious how that works.
And so is this really, I guess it's it. We really, I just really am dumbfounded how we could not, with a Springfield getting 14, and we could not at least get a couple. That just kind of, and with as critical as it is, that just kind of blows my mind, to be frank. So I'll stop with that.
Yeah, Steve, if you want to hop in, then Carol, coming to you.
Okay, well, just real quick, I just wanted to share that when we were notified that we didn't get any of the 5 grants, I did speak to our legislative consultant, and he kind of got into it a little bit, talked to the people that are in charge of doling out the money, and tried to ascertain, what the criteria was. And I asked, if not twice, 3 times, is this the final word? Is there anything we can do to try to, go back and re-present our case, or what did they look at? I will tell you that it seems a little very gray in terms of how this money was awarded, Mr. Sturman. When you say, hey, did they look about this creek bank and that? I don't get the impression that they went quite to that depth. I think there was some other things going on. It's my understanding, in talking to Jake Silverman, our legislative consultant, that there were a lot of people that were upset in terms of how this money was allocated, and it seems to be more political than necessary, by need. They are going to. There's a whole lot of people in Jeff City, as I've been told, that are rallying to make sure that the next tranche of this kind of money, and there will be another round of this sort of thing, that it will be done differently. And I'm hopeful that with the boots on the ground in Jeff City that are upset about this, maybe change the process. This process is gone. Again, I asked 3 different ways about how we can undo it and and retry and present our case, and that fell flat. So I'm choosing my words carefully, but I don't think the things that a logical person might consider or expect to be considered in this allocation, it doesn't appear that that's how this money was allocated.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth.
Carol? You're on mute still. Still on mute. Let's see.
Yeah, it's trying to give
There
me a
we go.
big thing in the middle while I was going for the little thing in the corner. I'm going back to a conversation we had about funding sources. I think Mr. Cross, you or maybe were the one that led it. And there were some mechanisms where you could form a neighborhood improvement sort of entity that could potentially raise money. Point being, there were other things besides municipality that could be created that would have some standing to address these problems. And it's sounded, kind of reading between the lines, like some of the municipalities, maybe the Ladus and the Frontenacs, that ended up getting some money, even though I think are also very affluent communities, maybe did a better job of sort of finding a slice where the income was low, or finding a slice where the population was less dense. And I'm wondering, if we think the rules are going to stay kind of that way, whether there's some way of organizing our needs under a different structure that would, potentially cut loose some funding.
Steve, you want to?
Yeah. Ms. Holthouse, you're correct. We've had discussions at this level that there are other avenues that potentially, could be done from a SID or a NID, a community improvement district, neighborhood improvement district. But there's pros and cons to doing that, setting it up, and bonds are being issued, and those bonds need to be paid, by the residents within that. So it is a way potentially to raise some money, but also, you got to get buy-in because people are now committing money. And I'm hopeful again, when you talk about, Ladue or Frontenac or some of these others that on the surface you scratch your head as to why they got money and we did not. Because I dare say that if you look at any statistic, the median income in those two municipalities, even though Wildwood is a relatively affluent area, those two exceed Wildwood in terms of median income. No question about that. So it's my understanding that the rules that there's a groundswell, if I can use that word, that may be too strong, but there is movement in Jeff City to change the rules in terms of how this tranche occurred and how it was allocated. That's my understanding.
Yeah, and if there's some recognition that the rules may change, I would say hold on and hope that fairness and common sense will prevail over time, and it'll all even out. My question was, if not that we would form necessarily one of these organizations with an intent of funding the entire projects, but if there was some way to, have the matching funds for a smaller area that would, get the grant money that would fund the majority of it, that might be a way to leverage, local money and live within their rules. But let's wait for the next round and keep the complicated out of our viewpoints until it's the only card we've got left to play.
Yeah. Rick, did I see your hand pop up?
Well, I just was going to mention that my experience with these federal dollars is that they typically, the law, then when it's written, the rules governing the allocation of the funds are fairly specific, and it's usually set at the federal level. So there may not be a lot of things that could be done to tweak the program requirements in terms of how they dole out the funds. In my experience, it's typically not political. They do know enough at the federal level to try to write the program so that they are allocated on the basis of merit, not politics. So I wouldn't wade too much into that, quite frankly. But I could be wrong, but that's just been my experience that at the federal level, they know that these things are always, there's always a temptation to make them political, and they write the rules such that that does not happen.
Mr. Sturman.
Yeah, these people who decide this, I don't know, I guess it's some sort of committee or board or task force or whatever. Who are these? Does anybody know who these people are in general, their positions, maybe in the state or federal, whatever, that make this decision and made all these decisions and dispersing the money? I'm just curious who the makeup of this group.
We could find that out. I could talk to our legislative consultant, and I think he could find out how, who those members are.
This was all handled through the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So presumably their staff was involved in the development of the criteria, the evaluation criteria that was utilized to make the decisions and rank the projects.
So Rick, are you saying that you got access to know who was involved in the decision-making process?
We could certainly inquire and dive deeper into that process, sure.
Okay, well, if you have a way to do that versus me going through our legislative consultant, then maybe you got a better source then.
I have had communications during my main thrust with a lot of different people and a lot of different departments of the natural resources. I sure would be curious to see if there are any familiar names.
Carol?
Rick, if you're reaching out for names, I'm wondering, or maybe it's even out there as a public record, if we could get copies of the successful grants from Frontenac and Ladue. Maybe there'd be something for us to learn about how they positioned that, or, why their metrics didn't compare to ours like we would expect them to. And if there was, something we either included that they excluded, or we excluded something they included, or whatever it might be. But if it sounds like the rules, the scoring matrix is not likely to change, then, I think maybe we should look at how we, write our paper the next time. So
I would also say that, at the government side of the things, when you're dealing out dollars like this, they don't want to be accused of being political. They want to have a very black and white scoring so that they can point to cities when they come like Wildwood to them and say, how did we not get successful application? They want to be able to explain that, and they want it to be as transparent as possible and avoid the opinion that it's political. So we can certainly follow up with Frontenac or other specific examples of successful applications that we feel don't make sense to us and try to get more information.
I'm not sure it's not makes sense, but it's just, we're curious about why, communities that on the surface would seem, very affluent as well, did better than we did. So to me, it's just like, look at the paper that got the A and figure out,
One thing I will tell you right now is
and not, again, no critique on the work that you guys did, and especially given how quickly you had to do it. But if you can, it sounded like maybe Springfield didn't take the whole city of Springfield to include in, every single application. Maybe you could say this affects a certain ward, or I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see if they found a way to position who would be impacted, or, who was available to help fund it or whatever, in a way that we didn't choose to do that. So
Mr.
all I'm
Ryan.
asking, and I'd be happy to, if Rick, if you can say it's out there on the website, or shoot me a copy of it or whatever, I'd be happy to read through it and see if I can, find any clues that I think might be helpful.
I really second what Carol had to say.
Well, we'll find out if those applications are available. Diane, do you know that off the top of your head?
All right, thank you.
I don't know if they will make the applications available or not, but we can check into that.
I would think there'd be public records, but maybe not.
All right.
Find out.
Anybody have anything else? Yes, sir, Mr. Bartlesmeyer.
Just glancing at some of these numbers, I didn't know if there's any way to know, our numbers are pretty, they don't seem to be made up. Our cost numbers, where some of these numbers, they're just a flat number. I don't know if that makes
$1 million.
and then also on top of that, some of them local contribution or $1, aka the city's not putting forward any money. I guess because they're accepted, that doesn't go into account for. I don't know. I'm just basically making statements, and I don't know if this is anything we know about the process of how these are selected. Does it matter how much information you put into your application for your costs? Probably not. So, all right. I don't know. I don't really have much. Just stuff I noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I agree.
Mr. Ron.
Sorry, I don't want to belabor it, but I did want to kind of touch on what Rick was saying earlier. Like the way the scoring was set up, there was 90 total possible points, and we were only eligible for 20 of them. We weren't even eligible for 70 out of the 90 because they all were income based, population based, and well, basically that. So there's questions about population. Unemployment was a big one. 10 points for population, 10 points for unemployment, 10 points for households in poverty, 10 points for low to moderate income, and 10 points for a qualified census tract. So we didn't get, we just don't qualify for any of that stuff. So the program was really kind of, I think, since it was ARPA funds, they were trying to disperse those funds to the communities with the most need. So I think that's kind of the way they. So and the flip side of that, we got 5 points for the project. Like we answered, this was literally the question: is the project likely to mitigate hazardous wet weather events to improve operations? That was your need question, and obviously our answer was yes. And then we got points for already having an engineering assessment. So that was really the only points we could get.
Yeah, essentially the scoring really wasn't based so much on need, it was based on population and your ability to pay. Is that fair to say, Dan? I mean, it's kind of unique in that regard, in my opinion, but
yeah, I mean, it was purely, as long as the project was eligible for the program that it was under, as long as it was an eligible project, then if your population and your income numbers were in the right place, that's the projects that were funded. It did not have a ton to do with the actual need in terms of, I'm saying need in terms of communities with the most need for economic resources, but they were not evaluated very thoroughly on the need for the actual project in terms of how it's going to improve the infrastructure. So that's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Berger.
Thanks. I know we've spent a bit of time on this point, but I do think the assumptions we may hold collectively could guide our future direction. So I want to kind of make sure that we're all pretty clear on that. If we operate under the assumption that this is a federal program, the guidelines for selection are not likely to change, we probably wouldn't get funding in the future. I mean, I think we were in the best shape to get it as we could have possibly been. The applications were thorough. We're clearly ready to spend the money. We have the need. We have a plan. So I think we should maybe spend some time thinking about that scenario. If we have some immediate needs, which I think we clearly do, are there some supplementary alternative sources of funding that we should or could be pursuing in the near term? And then, maybe are there modifications in the longer term that we may be able to make to try and get after federal dollars for some longer term projects? But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there that I really think that if we're looking at federal funding as kind of the golden opportunity for us to resolve some of these issues, the basis in which we get that could have a really big influence on our future activity.
I agree. I mean, Rick, you and Dan do these things every day, so I'm not going to dispute your take on this, but I spent a lot of time in Frontenac and Ladue, and I have a hard time picturing any part of either of those cities that would be any far away from where we're at from a socioeconomic standpoint or population or any of that stuff. I mean, usually with stuff like this, it's pretty clear when something kind of goofy has gone on, and it seems based on the reaction of other people in Jefferson City that I think that there's several people that aren't, let's just say, enthused about how this process played out, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we do have a unique opportunity in that, there is still a huge amount of this federal government money that's out there. So we have to kind of stay the course a little bit and see if we can tap into that. But I think, I think from day one, we've probably had an idea that nobody's going to come in here and bail us out entirely. We're going to have to step up and do some stuff. So it's probably going to be two things at once. Rick, I think I saw your hand pop back up.
Yeah, just a couple comments. The one thing that Frontenac does get points for that we do not is they are smaller, and they're about a tenth of our population, so they get points for that that we did not get. We could probably share I'm sure we could if we haven't. We could certainly provide that scoring criteria that they published that was utilized,
Yeah.
and that would probably help to clarify some things, I think, from your perspective. So we could certainly do that.
Well, I mean, I don't doubt that the criteria exists. I think it would be more beneficial if we can get the information to figure out, we scored here and these other places scored there, and then we just figure out why that might be. My gut tells me, as I guess the only elected person on this call, that somebody perhaps put a little bit of enthusiastic pushing behind some things more so than others, if I had to take a guess at it. But we'll see.
The last thing I was going to comment on, if that's okay, is that keep in mind, this was the ARPA funds. These were the American Rescue Plan funding that came out of the coronavirus. So it was kind of a unique one-time authorization for funds. And again, it was supposed to be rescue funds to help assist with recovery from the coronavirus. So it was unique, very unique. So point being that the next monies that we believe should be available are from the infrastructure bill that was passed through Congress. That's a totally different funding package, and the rules that will go along with that will be completely, I shouldn't say completely, but I would expect that they would be quite a bit different. And so hopefully how they are evaluating these projects will be different as well. But that still remains to be seen. We really haven't seen those details come out yet with that legislation.
Right. Okay. Does anybody have anything else they would like to throw out there in reference to our grant applications and things? Okay. Moving on. Let's hear about some updates on some projects.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Chair. The departments have prepared for your consideration a memorandum that identifies 3 projects, 2 of which are very familiar to the task force members. The first being the USGS partnership study of the Cox Creek watershed. Just in time, Dr. Leroy, the principal scientist for USGS, provided an update. And in that update, she kind of notes a couple of points that I think are very important. First, she thinks she will provide to us a comparison between the first 2 terrestrial LiDAR scans, just to see the changes that have occurred in the creek, Cox Creek, that is, in what I would consider a relatively short period of time. Secondly, the erosion pins that they use to help verify accuracy and use for the LiDAR purposes, some of them went missing. I don't think they went on vacation, but I think they took a ride in the creek somewhere downstream. Finally, there are a number of items that are complete. And so I'm expecting in the next year to see a lot of draft product from our team member, the USGS, and hopefully get some understanding. I know Ms. Holthouse will have some comments on this, but I just want to go to the next two projects very quickly. As we've discussed, we have been in a position of being shovel ready, I think, for some of our projects, particularly the 5 we've discussed. As you know, the task force endorsed and the city council agreed to proceed forward with permitting for the 404 section, and those will be submitted here shortly. And the departments strongly believe we should proceed forward with those regardless of the outcome of this latest round of grant funding. And then finally, at a recent city council meeting, the city council members had a discussion regarding the stormwater master plan and asked that that be a priority as soon as possible. And so as you can see, the departments are recommending that we tackle that issue in 2023. And Mr. Farmer, as a member of city council, you may want to add something to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things like everything else we've been trying to get going here. The more I think concrete information and plan we can put in front of I guess now the other 14 council members, the better. And they all seem, at this point, everybody seems very eager to try to get this project moved forward. You know, we have an election basically every year. So half the council can get moved out theoretically at any given time. So it's good to strike when you have people that are agreeable to what you're talking about. So I think the sooner we can get something like that done, the better for sure. Carol, you got any questions or anything on this?
The question I had was one of the items that was marked complete from the USGS update was that they had done the impact of different storm scenarios and including increased storage capacity. And I was wondering if it would be possible to maybe get some sort of preliminary headline report on, what the potential is, how much, I don't know whether they looked at it as with this much storage, it'd make this much of a difference, or, if you wanted to have this downstream impact, you'd need to store this much, volume of water. But I think that information would be really helpful as we started looking at detention basins. So if we could maybe, ask for Jan, and again, I'm sure they've got, computer printouts that are 10 feet deep answering that question. I think, we're just looking for the headlines of, we know enough now to kind of tell you, here's what you should be doing in terms of storage capacity, or we don't know and we will know, at this point in the future. And we can compare that to what we're going after in the short term with the 6 basins we've identified, and maybe set some priorities, or, reduce our scope or expand our scope. I don't know, but I think that information would be helpful.
Well, Madam Chair, I want to assure you and the rest of the task force members, we've not received any kind of product, whether it be in a preliminary, a percentage of completion, a draft. But what the departments can do is contact Dr. Leroy and ask her if we could have something, maybe just some initial impressions or some type of draft report for our next meeting at the end of January.
Yeah, again, nothing formal, just, let them know that information is an input to a process that is currently underway, and it would be really helpful to have, sort of the 80 for the 20 now. Just don't need the perfect answer, just get us what you can put on the back of a napkin right now, I think would be, or that it's not available or it's not coming, but whatever they've got, I think would be good to inform our activities next year.
We'll see what we can do, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about our work program items, if we got anything additional to add.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have one more item on the agenda. The detention basin analyses. And I've got some updates on that. So first and foremost, both Dan, Rick, Travis, Melanie, and I were in a call with the two consultants, Joe Wilson and Todd Wagner. They are a little further along than what we originally believed when we were preparing the agenda. Mr. Wagner has relatives in the St. Louis area and visits often, so he was able to do a little bit of the pre-investigation of some of the locations even before we received permission from the 5 homeowners association. Now, he did all of that from the vantage point of the street. He did not trespass. He was very careful to explain that to all of us. But we have a little bit of more information than we originally thought we would have at this stage. We will provide that to you. He was going to clean up a very draft report, and we'll get that to you as soon as we get that revisions from Mr. Wagner. But the good news is we contacted 6 of the homeowners associations where the basins have been identified. 5 of them have consented to further investigation. The one that has not is the enclaves at Cherry Hills, and we're working with them on a number of other projects. So from that perspective, I think they're taking them one at a time. And so we'll re-engage them here shortly. But the 5 that have agreed are identified in the memorandum itself. The departments of Public Works and Planning left it with the 2 consultants that they are going to put together a timeline of next steps for us and then identify if there are any additional charges beyond what was originally identified in the contract that was endorsed by this task force and ultimately approved by City Council. So we'll have, I believe, a lot more information for you here before the end of the year in terms of that draft report. And also that timeline and any changes to the contract that's necessitated by the process. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll close if there are any questions. And again, we had a group there, and if anybody does have questions, we all can answer them, or if anybody has any other impressions from that meeting, certainly I'd be glad to yield the podium, so to speak. Thanks.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was Mr. Wagner, but somebody was out at our pond with some survey equipment right around Thanksgiving. So they were working on, somebody was working on something out there. I don't know if it was us or somebody else, but I assume it would have been us or MSD, right?
Actually, I think it was him probably because he did come up for Thanksgiving holiday.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Any additional updates to the work program matrix? Easy for me to say.
No, sir, but the group, the team from City Hall is ready to answer any questions any of the task force members might have regarding it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any questions on what we're doing? Wow, everybody moved at once. Mr. Delonte. There you go.
Got it. Mr. Vunich, what you were just referring to about the information that would be coming from Wagner, is that, I noticed that we may not meet in December. Is that correct, Mr. Farmer, or do we? I guess I'm asking, would we be finding out any of that information before the end of the year?
Mr. Chair, with your permission.
Go ahead.
I think it's the intent of the departments of planning and public works to get you that report. As I mentioned, I think Mr. Wagner wanted to refine it just a bit. Well, once we get those refinements, we'll send it out as soon as we have it. And I anticipate that to be before the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Carol, I think I saw your hand up. Yep.
Apologies if it's there on the fine print and I missed it. One of the things we were working on at one point was a letter back to the people that initially had reported erosion conditions on or near their property. And I think we got as far as a draft. Did it get stopped there, or are we still at a point where we need the committee to do some review, or where are we at with getting back to those folks, I guess is the question.
Well, Madam Chair, at the last meeting, the revisions that you had made to the letter to save us some shoe leather, so to speak,
Yeah.
and going out and visiting with 80+ property owners was presented to the task force. Several of the task force members had some minor alterations. And so the draft, I think, is in final form and ready to be sent.
Okay. Is there anything keeping us from firing that off by the end of the year?
No, ma'am, other than just a kind of the workload we were under trying to get the
Okay,
grant
yeah.
applications in, but I'd like to think we could have it out in the month of December and start fresh with those folks in January.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Anybody have anything, any other questions or concerns? Okay. Any other matters for consideration? Anything anybody thinks we're missing or falling behind on or any of that stuff? Mr. Vunich.
Just one point, as was noted, we are proposing a meeting in January of 2023. That is consistent with the direction that the department's heard, that instead of meeting monthly, to do it every 2 months. So that's why it's January.
Yeah, I think the end of January is good. It should give everybody a chance to obviously get through all the holidays and things and get the new year started back off so we know where we're going. So I think that's a good plan for right now. And with our relatively smaller group, hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to get enough people so we can actually move some things forward, which will be great. Okay. Carol, you got anything you want to add in terms of closing remarks?
I don't think so. Just have a safe and hopefully relaxing holiday season. And we'll look forward to meeting with you at the end of January or middle of the end of January.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I know, certainly we were hopeful that we might be able to get catch a little lightning in a bottle here with some of these ARPA funds. But as frustrating as that stuff is, I'm kind of constantly reminded in at least my role on the city council that sometimes that's just the way this stuff goes. And so we'll just continue, with our course that we think is a good one. And at the end of the day, we're going to get this stuff figured out. So I genuinely appreciate all you folks that have take the time out of your day to, join us on these calls and things. And I'm excited in 2023 that hopefully we'll be able to actually maybe get to a point where we can move a little bit of dirt around or something. Wouldn't that be fun? We'll all go down and get shovels and throw dirt and rocks and it'll be great. All right. Anybody from the city team have anything else they would like to add? Nope. All right. Well, with that, I would be happy to take a motion to adjourn. Anybody care to make it, or we could just stay here hanging out? Mr. Sturman, I think I saw your hand pop up. Anybody care to second?
I'll second.
All righty, Mr. Bartlesmeyer. So we have a motion to adjourn. It's non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Anybody want to keep hanging out? All right. Happy holidays, everybody. Please, if you have not heard, we have our tree lighting ceremony this weekend. So that should be pretty fun. I think it's at 5, right? That we're lighting the trees, guys.
Yep.
All right. 5 o'clock. Hopefully, you can come out and hear the mayor speak, or we'll just light it. We'll see. We don't know. It's always a surprise. It'll be a good time. All right, everybody. Have a great evening, and perhaps we'll see you on Saturday.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Take care.